Hello and welcome to the December 2022 forecast with myself, Gary O'Toole. You can find me at timelineastrology.com. Before we get into the transits of the month, let's chant to Ganesh, the Lord of Vedic astrology, to help clear our mind and to focus us on the transits of December. So, a very simple mantra for Ganesh is Om Gang Ganapatiye Namah. So, I'll say it 3 times. Om Gang Ganapatiye Namah. Om Gang Ganapatiye Namah. Om Gang Ganapatiye Namah. A reminder that I use the sidereal zodiac. This usually subtracts 24 degrees from your tropical calculations. Most people use the 24 degrees. And a reminder also that the transits are just that. They are just one layer of many layers, and the main layer being your circumstances, what is referred to as dashas in Vedic astrology, the circumstances you find yourself in based on your own unique chart, as well as the location that you're at. That's going to have an impact also. So all of that needs to be considered along with the transits, which are really more like the triggers. And although they are personal triggers, they're also general themes. So that's why we can, as astrologers, talk about transits in a general forum. If you like the video, please hit the like button. If you haven't already subscribed, please subscribe or become a patron if you want to go much further and go deeper with the astrology. I do daily reports as well as monthly forecasts like these, including sign forecasts and a whole lot more, including the Scorpio video club, where I share some of the secrets of Indian astrology, Vedic astrology. So you can go to patreon.com/timeline astrology. You also get a 27-page report of the timeline of your life, I call it, which is basically breaking down the dashas, the cycles in your chart, and how you experience these cycles. So let's get straight into the transits. So December there are some more interesting dynamics going on in December that are more helpful, you might say. It's a bit of a mixed bag, as you might say every month and every year is. But December, there's definitely some more positive shifts going on, despite really some dire circumstances as well. And again, it depends where you are in the world, of course. But these good guys, as they're termed, Jupiter, Mercury, and Venus, these are the benefic planets. And if we throw Neptune into the mix as well and mix things up, maybe blur things a little bit, these are all doing some interesting things in the month. Jupiter has already gone direct, so that more positive expression and hope is moving forward. So even in the most dire circumstances, you might say that actually hope is even more important. That actually it's because of dark times, because of challenges in our life, that we actually have new hope. So Jupiter moving forward now in sidereal Pisces is more hopeful. It will be rejoined by Neptune in February, and Neptune's station on the 3rd of December is a sort of heralding that this final move out of Aquarius. Neptune is now nearly done with Aquarius. It's been here for 14, 15 years, and it's about to finish up in February of 2023, and it will rejoin Jupiter in Pisces. Now, Jupiter and Neptune in Pisces initially was not necessarily all that we hoped for, because it basically led to the inflation situation. Now, it does mean that we're likely to see issues in the new year again with inflation, also a lot more issues with flooding. This is the kind of quality of Jupiter and the god of the sea, Neptune, in the sign of Pisces. Pisces is the ocean. So that's quite easy to predict that, right? But inflation is another thing. And especially when Saturn moves out of Capricorn, moves into Aquarius in January, from January to April, while Jupiter remains in Pisces, joined by Neptune, we're likely to see more issues there in terms of inflation. It's sort of getting out of hand, because Saturn up until now is kind of keeping things in check with regulations and all of that, and the way Saturn does that and controls. But this seems like an out of hand situation in the new year. But again, there's something more hopeful, because when Saturn actually moves into Aquarius and no longer tightly aspects Jupiter, because Saturn is said to have a third house aspect from Capricorn onto Pisces, by going into Aquarius, it no longer contains, limits Jupiter. So in terms of the economy and inflation, that's not a good thing, okay? But in terms of hope for something better, that is a good thing. And this is the first time in a long time, at least from January to April, that we don't have this constraint on Jupiter. So Mercury is and along with Venus, because they're moving in and out together a lot for November and December, dancing between, each other and getting in and out of this kind of what they call planetary war in Indian astrology. And it's a strong term, but that's what happens when two people are vying for the same degree. And Mercury and Venus are moving in and out of the same degree, and we'll return to that by the end of December. Even though Mercury starts breaking away from Venus, it's normally a lot faster moving than Venus, but actually Mercury's about to slow down by the end of December and station retrograde on December 29th. So they'll come back together again by the end of the month and be at that same degree as they transition from Sagittarius to Capricorn. And then Mercury will back into Sagittarius on the 29th of December. Or on the 30th of December, I should say. It stations on the 29th, and then 30th, 31st moves back into Sagittarius for the new year. So it's a bit complex, a new year, and I'll talk more about that when we get to that. In terms of traveling and all of that, it's a bit complicated. But apart from that, Mercury and Venus currently in Scorpio and about to move into Sagittarius on December 3rd, 5th. That's also a bit complicated because the juncture between Scorpio and Sagittarius is a bit of a glitch. So be mindful of business relations and all of these things, and relations in general, finances and all of that around the end of the first week, really the first week of December. The other thing that's happening, of course, while Mercury and Venus are in Scorpio, is that the ruler, Mars, is opposite in Taurus and continues to retrograde. And this is creating, obviously, a very dire situation. Now, we can see this in, for example, in what's happening in China, and more uprisings, more frustrations been expressed by the populations there. And that's a Mars retrograde opposite Mercury, especially. So we can see that in that situation, but in your own life, of course, you'll have your own examples of maybe where you're feeling a bit frustrated right now. Things aren't moving forward. Mercury is about to station retrograde also, and joining Mars retrograde by the end of December. So the new year and New Year's Eve and into the new year, therefore, is going to be quite a challenge in terms of, if you're attempting to push anything through at this point into the new year, it's just not going to happen that easily. It's a very sort of frustrated period. And of course, one of the main things that will have an impact on is travel. So if you're planning on traveling for New Year's, I would first of all think long and hard about that. But if you do have to travel, pack a lot of patience and leave in plenty of time, and not expect delays necessarily, but be prepared for delays. Here where I am in Ireland, they're already talking about a mass exodus for the Christmas New Year period, which means long queues at airports. In the UK, they are planning strikes. So we know that this is going to happen, but you just look at the Mercury retrograde on New Year's and into the new year, and you know that that's going to be a problematic travel period. And then you add in the fact that it's winter and all of those problems. So you can just potentially see a lot of issues here and delayed flights and so on. In more positive news, Sun is moving into Sagittarius as it does this time every year, December 15th to January 14th. This is again the sidereal zodiac, so we're moving into the solstice here on the 21st. This is a time to really, I guess, reconnect with what's important and meaningful to us. The first degrees of Sagittarius are the lunar mansion called Mula, the root sign. It's very much about reconnecting to our roots, whether that's literally in terms of family roots or cosmically or spiritually, you might say. It's about reconnecting. And this solstice is also a time to really reconnect and slow down. And, it's kind of like it's a juncture in Indian astrology. Anytime the sun changes signs or changes direction, as it does on the solstice, it's like a juncture they call Sankranti. So it's basically a time to stand still, to take pause, to just notice the change of direction in your own life. And for most of us on the planet, on the northern hemisphere, that means a change from the darkest period and this shift out of this darkest period. And of course, for most people who will follow this, not necessarily the sun's movement in the sky, but we follow it in myth and in mythos, and we think about the Christ figure, and we think about Krishna from the Indian tradition, or Mithra from the in more ancient traditions. You can think about all of these deities over millennia, and basically they point to the same thing, that the sun moves to its lowest point for the northern hemisphere on the 21st, the winter solstice, and then for 3 days seems to hang in place at that point, and then on Christmas Day it moves up 1 degree, and so the sun is reborn. So thinking about this rebirth for yourself personally, and taking that time out during that period from the solstice right through Christmas, and then on into the new year with Mercury stationing retrograde, it's definitely a time to sort of take pause this New Year's, more than any New Year's, you might say, into any new year. So the other thing to mention here is that Saturn is doing this thing where it's going to move to the very last section, or pada, the last 3 degrees 20 minutes of Capricorn, which is the Virgo division, which means it's moving out of the Leo division of Capricorn, and it moved into the Leo division in February of this year. Now, it briefly did so in February and March, and then it moved back in August, and now it's moving out in December. So this is positive because Saturn in Leo is not the best place to put Saturn anyway, because Leo is all about leaders and Saturn is about challenging leaders and leadership and governments. You might say that's a positive thing because they need to be, but it actually creates a lot of problems and instability in the world, because Leo is in a very interesting relationship to Capricorn, where Saturn is right now. So it's in the sign Capricorn, but the Leo division of Capricorn. And basically, they're not on the same page, those two signs, Leo and Capricorn. They don't see each other. Again, Leo is the leader, Capricorn is the people, the systems that the leaders put in place, but they don't necessarily, they jar many times. And this is a jarring transit, and has been really for most of the year. But this is ending on December 14th as Saturn moves into Virgo. Then it's in the same element. It's in Capricorn, the very end of Capricorn, but in the Virgo division of Capricorn, which is another earth sign. So it's more helpful. Then it moves into Aquarius in January. And the first section or pada of Aquarius is related to Libra. So again, it's the same element, Aquarius and Libra. So these are more helpful transits into the new year for Saturn, more so. So let's talk about the new and full moon. The full moon is on December 8th, and it's exactly conjunct, as you see here, Mars. So this is the midway point in the Mars retrograde. So Mars is exactly opposite the sun, obviously, because it's the full moon. And so we have here this culmination point, in a way, this sort of climactic point of the Mars retrograde. But it's also just the midway point. We're only halfway through the Mars retrograde. But it is significant because when you're halfway through something, then there's only, another half to go. So whatever themes that you're playing out, whatever stories going on in your life around Mars retrograde, this is like reaching a climactic point because it's a full moon. And it's a full moon and Mars retrograde in Rohini lunar mansion, which is a very passionate lunar mansion in Taurus. It's really what we think about when we think of Taurus. It's very earthy and down to earth, but luxurious and refined, and likes to enjoy the comforts of life. This is a problem, of course, because Mars is retrograde. And so when we see what's happening in the world in terms of supply chains, in terms of resources and power cuts and all of that, Mars retrograde is creating a lot of issues here. Anytime the so-called malefic planets have an impact on Rohini in particular, there are problems with comforts, basic comforts in life. And of course, the most basic is food and shelter. That's Taurus. So we're going to see things kind of reach a head here in a way for this full moon on December 8th. But again, in relation to your own chart, where that is, it depends on what house position the sign Taurus is for you. I will release the sign-based forecasts very soon, so you can have a look at your own sign. Don't forget to subscribe though, and get notified of that video as it comes out. So that's the full moon on December 8th. So let's look now at the new moon by the end of the month on December 23rd. So a couple of days before Christmas, we have a new moon in this root star sign, this Mula lunar mansion at 7 degrees of Sagittarius. So here we have this reconnecting to our roots again, and a new moon in this sign is very much about connecting to our truth more than anything else, because Mula is about removing anything that's untrue, and we might see that in the world more obviously, but it's about personally connecting with that sense of truth in ourselves. And Mars is aspecting, and we can see here that Jupiter is now moving forward, which is more positive. This time is again a time to reconnect to what is deeply held within us, the truth that we hold. And again, even in terms of a spiritual truth on connection to that, this lunar mansion and this new moon on the 23rd of December could obviously mean that there's this kind of moving beyond the sort of material and all the comforts and all of the problems that, the lack of comforts have created now, but moving into something more meaningful and, less about the material. I think this Christmas period and New Year is going to be challenging for many people, obviously. But again, it's about finding hope in even the most dire circumstances. And I do feel like there is that hope there. And again, pointing back to Jupiter for this new moon is important, and reconnecting with that sense of hope moving forward. So that's the new moon on December 23rd. Thank you for watching. If you have any comments, if you have any questions, please feel free to post below. Don't forget to like and subscribe for that notification of the sign-based forecasts coming up for December 2022. And also just a reminder that the magazine now is out for patrons. So if you want to sign up, again, go to timelineastrology.com. You'll get the link, or go to patreon.com and you'll be able to read the magazine online now. We've got articles from Edith Hathaway, Marianne Jacuzzi, myself, and Barry Rosen, as well as a couple of patrons who've shared their own stories about their own timelines, their own dashas. And I have included my own interpretation of the transits for the year, the 2023 timeline. There's an ephemeris and transit guide. And yeah, you can find it all on timelineastrology.com. One last thing I want to point out again for patrons is that I will be recording the 2023 forecast very soon. I'm going to pre-record it this time. I've decided to, instead of doing it live, and I always feel like with these very long kind of forecasts, because it's the whole year forecast, it would take 2 hours. So instead of doing a 2 hour live, and I'm going to do a pre-recorded this time, and I'm going to release that for patrons before the new year. And then I invite patrons to join me on January 1st at 7 p.m. Universal Time. That's a Sunday, January 1st, for a Q&A. And I always feel that the Q&As actually go much further and do a lot more than just me presenting my slides, So the forecasts and my predictions for the 2023 period, of course, that'll be up, and you can watch those if you're a patron before then. And then joining me on the 1st, you can then ask questions and we can just take it much further and delve into each transit as we look at the year ahead. So again, thank you for listening and watching, and don't forget to subscribe. Don't forget to hit that like button. And until next time.